Welcome. This is Conversations for the Cause, innovative solutions to help kids succeed. My name is Barbara Benham, and I'm honored to serve as chair of the United Way of Central Ohio's Board of Trustees, and I'll be your MC today. We're very happy to have you with us. This is our opportunity to thank you, our most dedicated supporters, through what we hope is an intimate and inspiring virtual gathering. Today's event will take place in two parts. Part one will be a conversation between Lisa Cordes, our President and CEO of United Way of Central Ohio, and Lisa Ingram, President and CEO of White Castle, and our 2020 Tocqueville Campaign Chair. They will be joined by John Amendola, President and CEO of Grange Insurance, and our 2021 Tocqueville Campaign Chair. These exceptional community leaders will discuss why philanthropy and partnering with United Way is a priority in both their personal and their professional lives. Part two will be a panel discussion between leaders who have been closely involved with a critical and innovative new community effort called Success by Third Grade. Together, our guests will discuss what we believe is more important than ever, both an education and economic imperative for all of our children to be on a pathway to success by third grade. The call to action for improving outcomes for students in Franklin County has never been more important. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors of today's event, Mills James, for making Conversations for the Cause possible. And now we're ready to begin. I'm pleased to introduce Lisa Cordes.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I would like to introduce my guests, Lisa Ingram, President and CEO of White Castle, and John Amendola, President and CEO of Grange Insurance. I want to thank Lisa for allowing us to gather at this wonderful White Castle home office for this event. I would also like to thank Lisa for her leadership as the 2020 Tocqueville Campaign Chair during the 2020 campaign. Well, 2020 was some time ago.
It was.
But we've had some challenges getting together.
It seems like a long time ago, but.
Can you share some your reflections on your year as our campaign chair for Tocqueville?
Yeah, well, I think some of the things that I think about in relation to the campaign was just the timing of it and knowing that the whole world was also dealing with the pandemic. But one of the things that was most inspiring to me was the willingness of so many donors to continue to give to the good work of United Way. And so it was a much easier lift than I thought it was going to be. And the donors were really excited to be able to continue to support United Way. And it was also fun to be able to talk to some donors who knew United Way but didn't know all the great work that they were doing. And so to be able to meet with them and share a lot of the great work that you all are doing was very inspiring both to them and to me. So I was happy to do it and glad that we had a good campaign.
We did. Well, many people don't know that in the first 2 months of the pandemic in March and in April 2020, United Way in our country raised $1 billion for COVID. And just our organization we heard from over 1,000 donors who had never given to us before. So it really pointed to their trust in our brand and our ability to quickly deploy money to where it's most needed.
Yep.
So
And it was a great reputation that was very easy to build on in the conversations that I had.
Yeah. It was hard, but it was very affirming
Yes.
of our relevancy.
Yes.
And John, you have agreed to chair our 2021 campaign,
Yes.
which will wrap up at the end of March. Why did you say yes, and how is it going for you?
Well, first, I have huge shoes to fill in Lisa's leadership, and I think for me, United Way has been such a critical part of both the mission personally and professionally. And so given the opportunity when you and I had some dialogue and I talked to Lisa, it was the right thing to do. It was the right time to do it. Obviously, you know, what I want to be able to do is just figure out, is there a way to continue to lift our communities? And given the good work that was accomplished, how and what can I do to help lead through what I believe is going to be a continued challenging environment.
Right. So what strategies would you recommend as we think about our next chair even around how can we continue to inspire people to give and to give to United Way? I know I've always given for 30 years. I've given to United Way. Again, a trusted brand. I want to be a part of my organization that as a collective was giving to a larger collective in our community. And you both run great workplace campaigns, but how can we continue the momentum?
One thing that I know our team members appreciate is, the continued support that White Castle has always provided to United Way. We've been a long supporter, similar to Grange, of United Way, and they like the fact that we match their donation, and so that's a big benefit to our team members that they really enjoy and feel like every dollar that they're giving is being stretched more and being given more to organizations that they care about. Through United Way.
Yeah, and I concur with the points that Lisa made. I would simply add, I think what's really important is there's a lot of giving fatigue. And clearly what is important for the United Way is be clear on its message, be clear on its top priorities, and really continue to ensure that folks understand what's the optionality, because obviously you have multiple audiences out there with different ways to give. How can the model continue to meet the demands of the younger generations and how they see giving? How has that changed perhaps culturally for them? So I do think that the United Way needs to be clear in message, be clear and understand that it's a dynamic environment, to be agile as a collective organization, to be able to respond to how people want to give, as opposed to how we used to want them to give.
Right. Right. Well, and it's interesting that probably 60% of contributions we receive go to hundreds, thousands of organizations outside of United Way's mission. Right? So we're the vehicle for raising money. So that's become as important as raising money for our mission. And we're grateful, because what's at loss is millions and millions of dollars to workplace campaigns if they were to go away. And so we're really proud to come to a company, work with a donor, and help them give where they want to give, what they're most passionate about. But we also hope that it would be towards our mission. So to that end, and what donors will learn as they watch this video that we're producing today, is that several years ago, our board, when Lisa was chair, past chair and chair, went through a strategic planning process and really understood that we needed a clearer mission, and that donors wanted to understand impact and simply understand impact. So through a lot of strategic work, we have landed on a collective impact, a new business line, where we will take on complex challenges in our communities, where we're positioned to do that because of our ability to convene, our understanding of the needs in the community, and work differently. So we're going to be less of grant makers and more of systemic change. So we've been working for the past year to develop a goal for Franklin County. We recognize that third grade proficiency scores, literacy proficiency scores, were very low. And we have a movement called Future Ready in our community that's getting all kids ready for kindergarten. And that's when it stops, and there's not another catalyst organization that's taking the next piece, which is third grade reading. If you aren't reading proficient at the end of third grade, you're 4 times less likely to graduate from high school. And we know that if you don't graduate from high school, that's the greatest predictor you're going to live your life in poverty. So this has been so well received by the community, especially after the impacts of COVID. And we have 7 school districts that are aligned with us. And the goal is, by 2035, all children on a pathway to success in Franklin County. We'll hold the dashboard. Our donors will know, are these scores going up?
Right.
And at this time, the impacts of COVID have been tragic on education in our community.
Yes.
How does that resonate with you?
It's super exciting. As I as I reflect on this, I just think of a story when I was in my late 20s and I came back to Columbus and I was tutoring sixth graders for their math. And one of the things I noticed, these were Columbus Public, is they had a lot of challenges reading. And so getting the reading proficiency by third grade will so set those kids up to be successful, because all the kids that I interacted with, they had great dreams and they had wonderful ambitions. But if you can't read, that's a real struggle that's very hard to overcome. And so I would commend United Way for being the leader and the catalyst on that, and being the convener on that, because it's a really, really important goal for our society, and something that we should all be really, really excited about, because everybody wants kids to be able to read.
Right.
So it's wonderful you guys are moving in that direction. I'm happy to be a small part of it.
I think it's a brilliant strategy. I think the United Way focusing on root cause as opposed to the outcome. And oftentimes that's where society at large tries to fix a problem that has gotten way too far away from us in terms of those in poverty, those without education. So I love this strategy of striking at the third graders, really ensuring that they're prepared and they're capable of growing with an education and becoming those who can be successful in society. So bravo, excellent approach.
Well, and we've heard from the school superintendents why we're the right partner, and they say we know how to teach, but our children are coming to school with too many barriers for success. And we have a track record of understanding how to meet basic needs and stabilize families. So we can align a lot of resources that we already have to this work. Well, the announcement of Intel is so exciting, but let me tell you right now, this year, only 23% of third graders in Columbus City schools are reading proficient in the third grade. Now, if we say that that's the greatest predictor of high school graduation, that's an uphill battle. When we think about the recent announcement from the city and Columbus State about the Columbus Promise, we want as many kids graduating from high school as possible. So we see this as it's right for business as we help to strengthen the pipeline for the future.
I mean, both of our businesses, I mean, we need people that can read, that can do math, that can have social skills. All of those are really, really important. And in each grade, you take the stuff that you learn that helps you build your confidence to be successful in the next year. And so making sure that all of our children are able to read by the third grade is a big undertaking, one that's going to have dramatic generational changes and impact to our society. That's really exciting, but certainly it's not a small task. So I commend the United Way for being the leader on this and being the convener and bringing all of the great organizations that we have in Columbus together to help tackle this problem.
And we have a board that recognizes its long-term work, 2035, and are committed to that longevity.
That's good, because you definitely will need
Right.
sustaining power.
Yes.
With all, real dramatic change and real impactful change, you need good sticking power.
Well, we are talking with donors, and so we're talking with an audience that gives a lot to United Way and to the community. So we're here to thank you, but also just to hear from you about why you give in general, as what inspires you in your philanthropy. It doesn't have to be all about United Way.
You go.
Okay. So, it's interesting for me, it does tie back largely to the United Way, and I'm not just saying that to say United Way again. But for me, interestingly enough, I think it's important. First, it's very personal. And oftentimes, I think, we try to push on others our own beliefs, but the reality for me is, first, the United Way was the first introduction through business where I really began to understand what is the core purpose and mission of giving. And so I would say on a personal basis, I probably wouldn't be your best volunteer, and I knew that.
Yeah.
So I knew that financially, that was the way I could give back. And my moral obligation personally was the more successful I became, the more obligated I knew I needed to be to lift communities. And therefore, for me, it's been a very personal matter to make sure that my success is something that I don't take for granted, and I want to make sure that I can do the best that I can for those in great need.
My great-grandfather set up our Columbus Foundation in the 40s. And so it's always been very important in my family to make sure that we're giving back to the communities in which we operate. And so for me personally, finding an organization like the United Way that touches a lot of different really, really good work and good nonprofits that I may not know about was really compelling to me. And you guys do such a tremendous job of that. All the learning centers that I got to interact with when I was on the board, and so many other organizations that a lot of people may not have heard of but are doing really, really good work in the community is a big driver for me on why I continue to give to the United Way. And like you, I think, you know, as we continue to grow in our lives and in our responsibilities, it's even more important that we're giving back to the community in many different ways. And United Way is certainly a very big one for me.
Well, that's a reminder that over the past year, we learned to listen differently as an organization. We've all learned a lot, right?
Yes.
The past 2 years. And we heard from community that we funded a lot of great organizations, but there's more. Smaller organizations, neighborhood-based organizations, immigrant and refugee-led organizations. And so we learned more about the community. And we welcomed 40 new grant partners.
Oh, wonderful.
So we have a total of 92 grant partners.
That's great.
And 42% are led by people of color.
That's wonderful.
So we feel like we're really setting a great example of how philanthropy can change and evolve and respond.
Well, and I think, you know, if people are looking for a place, they want their dollars to go to more diverse organizations. You guys, like you said, have done a great job of finding those good organizations out in Columbus that are doing great work that we may not have heard of, but are really making an impact. And so it's fun to hear those kind of stats. So thank you for sharing that.
And it's very important, back to communication of the purpose of the United Way and what you've done. That message is a powerful one. So making sure that people who are either thinking of giving or part of an organization that is running a program, knowing that statistic is incredibly powerful.
Great. Yes, we're very proud of it.
Yeah.
Thank you for allowing us to do that. They're raising money for us. Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, any closing comments that you would like to make?
You know, I would just encourage people to find out about what you guys are doing. I think the readiness by third grade is really, really exciting, and I'm super happy to hear that you guys are moving in that direction, because I think it's a real need in our community, obviously, given the stats that you just shared with us today. So I hope that everybody hears that and considers giving to United Way.
Yeah, and I would just simply say that, you know, most importantly, again, is the fact that thank you for those who do give and give above and beyond till it hurts, as I like to say, which is really powerful and important. That what we need to do, again, as stewards in our communities, is to make sure that we communicate the message, and if we're not fit to communicate that message, get the right people in the room to make sure that we can ensure that you understand the power and the impact that the United Way is having.
Great, thank you. We've been trying to get together to thank you for your work in 2020 for a long time, and now it's safer to be together. So thank you for all you did for us as the chair in 2020, and thank you for all you're doing now as we wrap up the 21 campaign. And thanks to all of our donors who give so generously.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all.
So I'll hand it back to Barbara to tell you more.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm very passionate about this next discussion. We're now going to learn about United Way's innovative response to the challenges faced by our children and their families during this time period. The following panel discussion will be hosted by Steve Mason, CEO of the medical segment at Cardinal Health, a fellow United Way board member whose personal passion has led him to be chair of the Success by Third Grade Advisory Committee. I'm pleased to hand it over to Steve.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you, Barbara. Again, my name is Steve Mason, and I am happy to be with you here today. Let's introduce our esteemed guest. First, Dr. Talisa Dixon, Superintendent and Chief Executive Officer of Columbus City Schools. Adaro Robinson, Vice President, Executive Director of City Year, and Dr. Melvin Brown, Superintendent of the Reynoldsburg City School District. We really appreciate you all being with us here today to talk about this incredibly important subject, So I suggest we jump right in. Our first question is, what is the Success by Third Grade movement and why is it so important? Dr. Dixon, you want to start us off?
Oh, thank you. Yes. So the Success by Third Grade movement is a county-wide strategy of ensuring that all of our third graders are reading and reading on time. It is so important that our students are reading by third grade, that they're getting those skills. And we believe, or we know rather, that if our students are reading by third grade and they are learning to read, it's fun for them to read, then we know that once they get in fourth grade and beyond, they're going to be reading because they love it and they enjoy it. So it's important that we have this movement, we have a strategy and a countywide strategy, and that we utilize that strategy to involve stakeholders, because our students, we have a transient county, so our students kind of move from, sometimes we have families that are moving to various districts. And this gives us an opportunity to unite around a strategy that's going to benefit all of our kids in Franklin County.
That's great. Any other comments?
Just say the trajectory for kids to be successful in third grade is essential in building a foundation that allows them to be successful down the road. If we're going to ever close achievement gaps and opportunity gaps, it has to start there, because we know many of our kids come to school in kindergarten and a gap is already established before they even come in the door. This is helping us to deal with most of that.
One thing I really appreciate about this is that there's tremendous evidence that suggests when we invest early in our children that they will benefit from this. And so when you think about the work that's being done, what do you think success looks like?
Obviously, for this part of the continuum, when all kids are reading by third grade, we kind of alluded to this a little bit, they're going to be set up for success in terms of what the rest of the school experience for them is going to be. I think families will have a sense of what is and what is not expected when kids are going to be successful in school, and have an understanding of how they can partner to help push that success forward. And I think, from my standpoint, I'm always in a position where I'm thinking about how we can close economic gaps. We can never break that cycle of poverty that exists unless we tackle this piece, and that kids are being successful as early as possible, so that their school experience is more positive, they learn more, they're able to achieve more, which helps them to then go back and break that cycle of poverty in the long run.
I can piggyback on that. I agree 100%. And when you're looking at how we're working with students and being able to achieve in their reading scores and their reading comprehension, that really translates into other areas of their academic success. And you're talking about breaking the poverty cycle, breaking the economic cycle, and breaking the graduation for many of those who aren't on the path to graduate, right? That's really the goal, to get them to graduate and to go on to do great things after school.
And I think also there's a lot of research that suggests there's a 1 million word gap difference with students in poverty and non-students, students who are not in poverty. So that is significant, right? So the earlier that we introduce our students to reading and they enjoy it, it will close that gap. And so we know what happens, right? The more you know, you're exposed to words. It's going to help you just with our standardized testing, right? Just knowing how, not that they're always good, right? But we know that our students, in order to measure their knowledge, they have those formative and summative tests. So the more words students know and able to understand, we know that success, because our students will know how to articulate and enunciate and really understanding words and meaning. That's important.
Yeah, as we start to think about how to drive change and who has to be involved in this movement, it might be helpful if one of you would just walk through for us, what's the day in the life like for our students?
Given where we are and battling COVID and the implications of that, which impacts so many different aspects of our lives, our kids are obviously bringing the academic needs as they come in the door, and those are things that we initially think about that we need to address. But they're also bringing mental health and social emotional needs as they come through the door. They're bringing economic needs as they come through the doors. And it's important for us to be able to galvanize our forces to try to address all of those things. We talk about the impact of reading and what it can do. It opens up so many opportunities that they can't see unless they're actually in books. I think about my own experience. we didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid, and growing up was difficult, but books took me somewhere else and made me see something else, which was a possibility for me to aspire to. Our kids need to see that. They need to have that experience. And if they're not getting that at school and they're not getting it at home, it gets them in a position where they can only see what's around them, and they can't aspire to what might be out there. So knowing that they're dealing with those things as they come in the doors every day, it's difficult. And we as adults have to be ready to collaborate and respond to those needs.
Really insightful, thank you. When you think about that collaboration, who has to be involved? Who has to have a seat at the table to drive change?
I think everyone, right? So I think what a learning from the pandemic is that school districts cannot do it alone, and we must break down those silos, right? And the community becomes more involved and more knowledgeable about where students are. We know that each community wants all of their students to be successful and be productive citizens, but now here's an opportunity to bring in partners such as City Year and others to come together and say, how do we frame these conversations, right? What is a countywide strategies, just like United Way is doing? They're bringing and convening partners who understand the importance of reading, understanding that if we don't be transparent and identify the barriers that our students and families are facing, then there's no way we're going to be able to close those achievement gaps that we know exist. And now everyone understands that they are knowledgeable that they exist because COVID has really exposed that. So it is everyone's job to make sure that all of our students are successful in convening people together, making sure that they understand what those gaps exist, and putting together a strategy that everyone has a part to play. That's what's important. We will know that it's working because we all understand what the charge, what the mission is.
And I can also share from a nonprofit standpoint, being in this work, 25 plus years, COVID was really challenging, it is challenging, but one of the benefits that I can see is when you talk about collaboration, I've seen this community come together in a way that I haven't seen in the previous 25 years. United Way was a facilitator, Columbus City Schools was a facilitator. All these nonprofits were in this virtual space, sharing resources, sharing ideas, sharing ways to help students get the resources they need. Everything from Chromebooks to lunches to connecting parents to opportunities that were always there, but all the linkages between all of these networks, particularly nonprofit networks, to be able to support those young people and families. So the fact that we're going to be seeing that enhanced over the next couple of years and the way that nonprofits are partnering with these school districts and with families, it was unprecedented in my mind. And it is extremely important because we knew that those gaps were there. We know that those challenges were there with many of our families, but it was, it just took it to a whole nother level of where those gaps were and how we fit in to assisting those families and students with what they needed.
But I also think that we knew the gaps were there, but we didn't have a unified strategy, right?
That's it.
Everyone was working in isolation, whether it's Columbus City Schools, whether it was Reynoldsburg, the other districts, we were just left alone to kind of figure it out and work it out using our data and doing what we normally do in school districts, right? So to your point, I think coming together and saying that, what's happening for my students and families is exactly what's happening with Melvin and other families, right? That we know poverty is an issue, right? And school districts can't, we can't restore poverty. I mean, we can address poverty with others, but we can't solve poverty, right? So that's where others come in and help us unite around a strategy that's going to help families. And when you help families, families understand what they need to do to help students, right?
Yeah, if we can think about that from the standpoint of what does the future look like? Yeah. It's easy to get bogged down in the day-to-day and you're like, this work is really hard and exhausting. But if you think about the future, it's pretty exciting to know we'll have parents and business partners at the table with schools to address some of these things. We've known the gaps were there, as we talked about, but we did a really good job of admiring those issues and doing nothing about them. We talked about them a lot, but didn't put resources and work behind them to start to break those down. And now we've been forced to do so. And if we do it the right way, it's pretty exciting work.
Yeah.
You've really great points. When you think about first off, there's an incredible need for this. And I'll come back to that in a second. This is a crisis for our students, and we need to address it. And when you hear what their life is like around their ability to be educated, and all the players that need to be at the table to drive change. You all mentioned so many different areas. We've got the nonprofit segment, which is really important. We've got city leaders that have to have a seat at the table. Organizations like United Way being the backbone to help convene all this is important. Corporate partners that have an interest in wanting this to be a prosperous community for future employees of companies. You've got the parents and the caregivers, so incredibly important. And then we've also got to be highly inclusive as we go through this. But coming back to something I just said, this being a crisis, what are the numbers like right now as it relates to third grade proficiency?
Well, I could start with Columbus. We know that our students, I was just visiting a class this morning, and the teacher had posted on this whiteboard that his current fourth graders were reading at 37% as third graders, and now they're up to 51% at fourth graders. He was so proud of that, and his students were celebrating that, right? So we know that the numbers for us are not what we wanted, but we were, in a pandemic, we were learning remotely. It's hard. It was hard for many teachers to engage students in reading, looking at a device. That's why we were advocating to make sure that our students are in class with their teachers, which is the best place for them to do so and do it safely. But we also are ensuring that we are teaching on task, right? So we have the curriculum, so we're using foundations in our district and many others. And we know that students, when they know how to sound out words, and so they can look at a word, they can sound it out, then they will be more comfortable sounding out another word. And so for that is getting our students not looking at last year, right? And saying, okay, we're in a pandemic. We didn't think we would still be this year. But how do we get students excited about learning again, knowing the importance of learning, and just not focusing on what we did not do last year? And so this year we're focusing on growth. How many of our students have, that we've seen some growth from last year's scores to this year's scores, and really keeping them excited and keeping their parents involved so that they are working at home and working at their, with City Year and the other partners who have programs that United Way is funding for our partner programs. That's what's important for us. We're in a pandemic, right? It's not going to be perfect, but we can still engage our partners to ensure that our students are excited about coming to school every day and learning. When you make learning fun, students are going to want to come and be engaged. And our teachers have our tools. So, and you let our teachers do what they do best, and that is teach. So we got to get out of their way so that they can do what they do best.
You said something so important. As I have the privilege of being part of the advisory committee that's leading up Success by Third Grade, one key theme has come in every step of this way, which is the passion that comes from the school superintendents, from the teachers that we meet with. They want to teach, and it's all of these other components that are challenging, that are in the way. And when we think about the need for this, we've seen significant dips in third grade reading proficiency since COVID. Already at below standard levels pre-COVID, they've gotten worse. And so we know we just can't go fast enough as we think about this. Any thoughts around just some misconceptions in these areas?
One of the things we try not to talk a lot about is learning loss, quote unquote. I think our kids were able to pick up some skills and some ideas of things we would not have anticipated they could have, and we need to capitalize on those things in order to help them in other aspects. If we're strictly based on standardized tests and what's there, then yes, maybe that's a real thing. However, if we're able to give kids relevant real world experiences in class, so they can translate their learning into real world context. Those are things that kids are learning a lot, they're being able to do a lot more successfully. In our case, obviously there's never a great time for a pandemic to strike. Let's put that out
Totally
there.
fair point.
However, for us, it hit at a really difficult time because we were just making some serious strides in terms of what third grade reading looked like. Since the pandemic, we probably lost about between 6 and 9% of our kids have fallen off track, and we've got to get that back in order. So it's important for us to not only create schools that allow kids to learn content, but allow them to apply that content as well, which is why reading is so important. If I don't have an understanding of what happens in other places in the world through what I'm reading, if I don't know what those things are, then I can't apply them or aspire to doing those things myself.
I also think a misconception is that we're getting back to a sense of normalcy and that we're ready to recover, right? I don't believe recovery starts until the pandemic ends. And then I think that's important that we're still in a pandemic. We are still seeing our students and staff, experiencing a lot of stress. In many cases, it's traumatic, right? So you think about our second graders. They were pre-K students, kindergarten students rather. And we have our ninth graders, which that has been kind of troublesome because, this is their first year in high school. So I think a misconception is that we're getting back to a sense of normalcy, and that is just not the case. I think what we are seeing that is positive is that we're seeing that the community is standing up, and our partners, just as United Way, are saying that this is a strategy that is important for the entire county, and we must step up to ensure that our students are reading, engaged in reading, making it fun, and we are going to help our school districts find those partners who can help our students and their families. So no, this is not normal. It's going to be it's going to be new for us, right? Because we'll never go back to pre-pandemic. But I think there was a lot of learnings, and if one learning that we've seen that I think is going to I hope that we won't go back to any other way, is that there's more of an understanding of the challenges that school districts are having. And we know we need more people to stand up and say, I am going to help.
Absolutely.
I am going to do something to ensure that the students in my community have whatever their needs are, whatever they need. And that means, I may have to give differently. I may have to volunteer. I may have to do something different to ensure that school districts in my community have what they need.
I think another thing that needs to be explicit is in terms of returning to normal. Let's pretend that was really a thing. We were going to return to the way things were. We have to be willing to concede that normal did not work for all kids. There were so many kids who have fallen through cracks because of the way the system was set up. So it's our charge, it's our responsibility to create a brand new normal that does work for all kids. That means we have to work differently. We have to collaborate. We have to bring other people to the table. We have to be willing to say, these are things we don't do well, so who can help us fill those gaps ourselves? I think for a long time, schools have just been able to sit back and say, these are the things we do well, and this is what we're going to do. Right. Now we need to get other people to the table to help us do some of those other things that we aren't accustomed to doing.
And the partners too, and I think I think we are looking at our partners differently too, and we have been. We're saying, if we're going to partner together, how can we ensure that we're more intentional, right? Because we all want the same results. We've been talking about that, but if we have 100 different plans, that's not what we want. What's the strategy? How can we hold one another accountable that we're utilizing the same strategy? We're having those tough conversations, if we need to do a mid-course correction, but we're doing it in a way that we're professionals and we all have the same goal in mind, is that all of our students are successful. In this case, all of our third graders are reading. And we need to do something else, Superintendent Brown, Superintendent Dixon. And this is what we need to do to ensure that. Right. And then we can say, United Way, hey, help convene some more people here. We need some additional people here helping us. And I think those are the conversations that are very different for us. because it's not just an individual district conversation. It is how do we ensure the success of the students that are in this county? And I think that's powerful.
Anything you wanted to add in there?
I think Dr. Dixon said it 100%. You know, we had to make some course correction. Even pre-pandemic, with the new district superintendent coming in, you had your own way of how you wanted to see the district run.
Yeah.
So we had to make sure that we were lockstep in what your curriculum looks like, how your we worked in the classroom, how we connected with the students, teachers. All of that had to be lockstep in what your vision needed to be. Portrait of a graduate, we talked about that. You know, in your convocation, you talked about that whole school, whole child model, and that really fits in with what we're doing as we work with students as they matriculate through the educational experience. And being a partner, a key partner with the district, with some of the other partners that are working strictly in the school building with students from the first bell to when the last student leaves, we can't be doing our own thing, right? We have our own metrics, but those metrics have to match with what the the area superintendents, the building administrators, and the classroom teachers, what is it they need for their students to be successful? And if we're not in that same space or we're not strategically on the same page, then we're back to where we started, you know, and we're constantly just spinning our wheels. But we don't want to be in that space. We want to be as helpful as we can and impactful for the district.
Yeah, you're all saying it so well. In other words, there's not a set one size fits all strategy. There's a lot of components here. What do you think is one of the biggest areas that has to happen to achieve success?
I think we have to be able to recognize that the Franklin County area is so much bigger than just, say, Columbus or Reynoldsburg or what have you. There are kids out there in every jurisdiction who have needs. I don't care if you're talking about the least affluent community to the most affluent community. There are kids that still have needs. And being able to recognize what those needs are in all of those communities helps us build capacity so the entire area is increased in a more productive fashion, and we do that together. It's easy to say, okay, this school has a free reduced population of 65, 70%. They have these needs. Well, I can guarantee you we can find another school with 20% and find just as many kids who have needs of that nature. So we have to be, the fact that we're looking at this from a county framework is exciting because we're now looking to help each other move forward as opposed to resources being poured into only one community that can't help the entire region.
We've talked about the fact that there's a need for this, right? Our children need this work. One thing to be thinking through for those listening, what will happen if this movement isn't successful?
Well, one, we cannot allow it not to be successful, number one.
Totally agree.
Two, I think school districts are going to continue to do what school districts do, right? We're going to continue to look at the data, continue to, to help kids, right? The power of this movement is we don't have to do it in isolation. And I need to underscore that. There are learnings that I can get from Reynoldsburg, and vice versa. Because when we're talking about parents, specifically parents of poverty, there are ways that we can help our parents be more knowledgeable about why it's important for their students to read, what should they be reading from, what should be happening in pre-K and kindergarten and first grade and second grade. So with that, I think we're going to be successful because we're going to continue to do that. I just think is more important, is as important rather, is that we have an understanding of around the county and with partners to understand what they can do to better assist districts to ensuring that we're a success. And that may be additional funding, those resources, maybe financial resources, it may be human capital, right? We're seeing teacher shortages around the country, right? It may be your business coming in and volunteering, reading with students. I mean, even doing it online. So there's so many different creative ways that we can get others to help us. So we're going to be successful, but we can be more successful with an aligned strategy that everyone buys in and understands the why. And when people understand the why, you can't turn your back, right? You can't turn your back when you say, oh my gosh, this is how many students that are not reading. This is how I can help change that narrative. who can turn their head.
Totally agree.
Right?
Love it.
Yeah.
You think about it from an economic standpoint, Columbus is a community on the rise. Industry's coming in, businesses is doing well. We're going to need a workforce that's able to go out and work in those spaces. And if we're not doing our job now as early as possible to get the kids who are in third grade, who 10 years from now are going to be those people going out into those roles, if they're not getting ready for that, that hurts our economic base. Then we're in a position where we're actually recruiting people from other states, other regions, other countries to come in and fill those needs. When we have capital, human capital right here, that if we work hard early to hone it, they'll be more than ready to go out and take on those leadership roles and make our community as robust as it possibly can be.
Well said.
And Dr. Brown, you talked about earlier that books open up a whole new world for you. And we're talking a lot about social justice in this community now, and a diversity and an equity and an inclusion lens. If we're thinking about all of these things, whether it be job creation, employment, economic development, and our community growing, we have to be thinking about how are our children being represented in what they're reading and what they're experiencing and how they're being taught and how we're volunteering. And all of the partners we're bringing in, right? There always has to have that DEI. I would even put in belonging. That's one we use in City Year as well. So when we're working with these young people, how are we thinking about those areas that DEI be? And conveners can make sure that that's a thread that goes throughout this as well, because that's an important piece for this to be successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. It's really, really insightful. And the one statistic that always sticks with me is research shows that children that aren't reading by third grade, proficiently by third grade, are 4 times more likely not to graduate from high school. And that is just sobering to me, and just reinforces the why we have to be successful, which I really love. What needs to, when we think about, this is a journey, and it isn't gonna get solved overnight, but just thinking about the next 12 months, what do we think needs to happen? Like, what are some of the things on your mind that we need to tackle first?
Wow.
Looking at a lot of recovery, obviously, from the implications of COVID. You can say from a health standpoint, those are needs, mental health-wise, there are needs, but academically, there are going to be some needs, because our world is going to look different. And if we're trying to prepare our kids for the current world we're in, they're not going to be ready for the world that's different. We've got to be able to think down the road as far as what we want things to look like and prepare kids for that. So I'd love to be able for us to craft a vision, a sense of looking forward in terms of what all that will look like, so we can build an infrastructure to get kids to that point. With an understanding we can't get there in a year. That's something we have to accept and understand and navigate, knowing that there's no magic bullet that helps us solve this problem. It's a time thing, and it's going to take time, effort, and people at the table to make that happen.
Yeah. I agree that building that infrastructure is so important, and people having an understanding. Again, I go back to the why. I love what Dr. Brown, when he stated that what this means from an economic development lens and what happens, and we want a workforce. We want students to be able to become whatever. If they want to go to college, the military, the workforce, students they understand what that means and understand what they need to do, right? So as students owning, having some sense of responsibility that I want to know how to read, because if I read, I can become whatever it is. And those business partners and city leaders joining together to Melvin's point and saying, we want a ready workforce. We want all of our students being able to read, but we don't want it. We have to get rid of those barriers, those hurdles. So I think that's where the journey comes, right? The journey is, how do we make it a priority for all kids? I love how you said the DEI and the B, belonging. And those are those critical and crucial conversations that we have to have, because we build a strategy and we don't build it for all kids, then we've not done anything different, right? We've just come out of pandemic and just come, back to pre-pandemic with our thinking. So I think that's what has to happen. We have to address the elephant in the room, so to speak, that there are some barriers. There's some those DEI conversations we have to have about who we're serving and why it's important for all kids to read regardless of your color, your gender, your family background, and think about it as an one workforce, that in an informed workforce, and getting our students ready to meet the challenges of tomorrow, and that tomorrow may be 10 years or 15 years out. So that's important, and I think we don't do that well, but we have to do that better. Yeah.
You mentioned the barriers. I think it's something. I'm glad you said that, because something that I would love to see happen within the next 12 months is to identify what those barriers are, and have people not only recognize them but accept them for what they are, and then we can start doing the work to alleviate it. We have to know what they are. You can never get to a goal if you don't know what that goal is, and far too often, some folks in communities don't want to recognize those particular barriers. The whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. Sometimes kids don't have boots. So what are we doing to make sure they have those things?
And you said something really, really good about students being able to advocate for themselves.
Yes.
I think that's a big deal as well, and making sure, I think something that really needs to be happening more frequently is having the youth voice at the table, whatever that looks like, and whichever iteration, or however young they are, or however old they are, and so that they can tell you what their barriers are. Because I may not know, I could be around as many young people as I like, but if I'm not asking them and then utilizing that information for programming, curriculum instruction, I don't know how that all fits together, but their voice has to be part of that conversation.
Well, you've all done an incredible job of describing and outlining and talking about the why we in Central Ohio, Franklin County, should all believe in this. This is incredibly important. We're getting to the end of our time, and I thought it would be helpful if each one of you would give the one thing that you want this audience to take away from this session.
For me, I know in Columbus City Schools, we just finalized our strategic plan, and our new theme is the power of one. You know, it takes one teacher, one principal, one person to make a difference in a student life, right? And so you think about the power of the difference one person can make. So when I look at this strategy as a whole, it takes one countywide strategy, right, to bring people together to achieve one goal, and that is for all our third graders to be successful. So, so the takeaway is, it's the power of one, right? And then we galvanize and we come together. That is no way we can be successful.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
In Reynoldsburg, we developed a mission statement that was for us to drive our work, but I'd like to think it's also universal. We say empowering leaders to impact the now and innovate the future. Obviously, we'll want our kids to be able to do well right now, to navigate the situations they're in right now and do so well, but also understanding how that is going to evolve over time and how can they innovate what's going to be coming in the future, some of which we can't even predict and don't know. So many respects of what we're trying to prepare them for are unknowns that we have to prognosticate and get a feel for what's going to be happening for them, 15, 20 years from now. But I want them to be ready for that, to understand that being uncomfortable now is good because it provides for growth. So be comfortable being uncomfortable. We talk about that a lot. That's what I would want folks to take away.
Yeah, that's good.
I would urge those who are listening to read the strategic plan for the school districts here. Understand what's going on, be in the know, and I'll echo this United Way sponsored conversation, but their mantra, give, advocate, volunteer, right? And so in those spaces, understand what the districts are doing, understand their goals, understand their vision. The superintendents, to have these folks at the table to share their vision, go and read up on their vision, and then give financially, advocate, public policy, volunteer, right? Those three things I think can be very helpful.
Those are all incredibly excellent points, and I hope everybody that's listening can feel what I feel, which is the passion from these leaders in our community that have for driving change, We're off to a pretty good start. We've got a lot of activity. We got a lot of people that are showing up with a seat at the table to get engaged, so that's really exciting. And I'm incredibly appreciative of all the efforts that we've seen so far. But we got a lot of journey ahead of us that we're all engaged and on board for. You know, I'd close with one thing I want everyone to take away with. We've got a bold goal of by 2035 that our third grade students in Franklin County will be on a road to success. And that's what we're going to focus on. So thanks everybody for your time, and back to you, Barbara.
We hope you feel inspired by what you heard today. Thank you for being with us. We really do appreciate your interest in this very important issue and your ongoing support of United Way. You can ask further questions of the panelists by contacting the Resource Development Team at United Way. Thank you for coming together when we really can't be together so that we can continue to live united.